Get out of here immediately! You don't belong at this premium check-in. People like you are not welcome here.
The gate should have closed 7 minutes earlier. Instead, an entire boarding lane stood frozen because a little boy in a gray hoodie had just been told to step away from the counter like he was a security threat.
Do not reach into your bag.
Michael Turner's voice cracked through gate 14, hard enough to silence the terminal around them. The boy stopped immediately, one hand still resting near the zipper of his backpack. No panic, no arguing, no tears, just stillness, the kind that made adults uncomfortable. Behind him, business travelers shifted impatiently. A man in a camel coat checked his Rolex with an exaggerated sigh. A woman near the priority lane lifted her phone slightly, pretending to text while recording everything. Outside the giant terminal windows, Flight 287 to New York sat under white floodlights, connected to the jet bridge, engines quiet, waiting. Every minute on the ground was costing the airline money. And somehow the center of the delay was an 11-year-old boy standing alone in worn sneakers. Rachel Bennett felt sweat gathering beneath the collar of her uniform blouse. She had worked evening shifts at Denver International Airport for almost 8 years, long enough to trust instinct over paperwork, long enough to know when something felt wrong. And this felt wrong. The boarding pass in her hand still read the same thing it had 3 times already. Ethan Walker, Seat 3 Alpha, business class, paid in full, no fraud alerts, no booking flags. Nothing technically wrong, but the child standing in front of her did not look like the passengers who usually boarded first. That was the thought she would replay in her mind later, again and again, not because she said it out loud, because she did not have to. People reveal themselves most honestly through the assumptions they never question. "Where are your parents?" she asked again. "My mother's already in Manhattan," Ethan answered quietly. "My father flies in tomorrow." His voice was calm, controlled, too controlled. Rachel frowned harder. Children separated from parents usually looked frightened, or excited, or overwhelmed. This boy looked prepared. That bothered her more than fear would have. Michael stepped closer, broad shoulders stiff beneath his Navy supervisor jacket. At 46, he carried himself like a man who believed confidence alone could prevent chaos. He glanced once at Ethan, then at the backpack, then at the boarding pass.
Decision made. Who purchased this ticket?
He asked. "My office did." A few nearby passengers looked up immediately. Michael's eyes narrowed. "Your office?" "Yes, sir." "What office?" "Walker Holdings." The answer landed flat. No emotion, no hesitation. Like a child repeating something rehearsed. Michael folded his arms slowly. "Listen carefully, son. Kids do not walk alone onto international flights in business class without adult supervision. If there's something we need to know, now's the time." "There's nothing wrong," Ethan said. Again, calm, always calm. That was what unsettled the adults around him most. A teenage boy sitting near the charging station quietly angled his phone camera higher. An older woman beside the window whispered to her husband, "He's just a child." The husband leaned closer.
"Maybe.
But nobody travels like this unless money's involved. And there it was, the real thing hiding underneath the situation. Not safety, not protocol, class, appearance, expectation. Americans like to believe they judge people by character. But airports told the truth about people faster than churches ever could. Who gets questioned? Who gets believed? Who gets watched? Michael pointed toward the wall beside the gate scanner. "Step over there." Ethan obeyed immediately. No resistance, no complaint. That should have de-escalated everything. Instead, it made Rachel even more suspicious. In her experience, innocent people usually rush to explain themselves. This boy didn't explain anything. He simply waited, as if he already understood how adults behaved when they thought someone didn't belong. The boarding lane slowed to a crawl behind them. Passengers kept glancing toward the scene while pretending not to stare. Rolling suitcases clicked against the tile floor. An overhead announcement echoed through the concourse about weather delays in Chicago. Still, Ethan stood there silently beside the glass wall. Small, thin, hands folded lightly in front of him. Michael stepped closer. "I need written authorization from a parent or guardian." Ethan nodded once. "Okay." Then he reached carefully toward his backpack, and Michael snapped, "Do not reach into your bag." The words hit hard enough that nearby conversations died instantly. Even Rachel flinched. For the first time all evening, something shifted across Ethan's face. Not fear, disappointment, small, quiet, painfully adult. He slowly removed his hand from the zipper. "All right," he said softly. That should have been the moment someone realized what was happening. An 11-year-old child had just been publicly treated like a threat before anyone even checked his paperwork. But systems rarely stop themselves once authority commits publicly, especially when people are watching. Rachel could already feel the atmosphere changing around Gate 14. Phones lifting higher, passengers paying closer attention. The kind of attention corporations fear because it cannot be controlled once it spreads online. Still, Michael doubled down. "Call airport security," he told her. Rachel hesitated, only half a second. But Ethan noticed. Children notice hesitation faster than adults do. She picked up the phone anyway. "Yes," she said quietly into the receiver. "We need assistance at Gate 14. Possible documentation issue involving an unaccompanied minor." As she spoke, Ethan looked back through the terminal windows toward the aircraft waiting outside. The reflection in the glass made him look even smaller. But there was something else there too. Not helplessness, observation, like he was memorizing every face in the room, every choice, every tone. And somewhere deep beneath Rachel Bennett's growing discomfort was a realization she did not want to examine too closely. This was no longer about whether the child belonged on the plane. It was about why everyone had already decided he didn't. The two airport security officers arrived without urgency. That was the first thing Ethan noticed. No running, no hands near weapons, no alarm in their faces. Just two tired men walking toward another problem at the end of a long shift. Officer James Carter moved first. Early 50s, broad shoulders, gray beginning to show along the edges of his beard. The kind of man who has spent decades learning that panic usually made situations worse. Beside him walked Officer Luis Ramirez, younger, sharper, eyes moving quickly across the gate before settling on the boy near the window. James stopped a few feet away from Ethan.
You the passenger?
"Yes, sir." The officer studied him quietly. Children usually looked up at security officers with fear or embarrassment. Ethan just looked tired. James glanced toward Michael. "What's the issue?" Michael answered immediately. "Unaccompanied minor, international route, premium cabin, refused proper verification." Ethan spoke softly before James could reply. "I didn't refuse." Michael's jaw tightened. The officer looked between them. That tiny pause changed the atmosphere more than anyone realized. Because for the first time since this started, somebody was actually listening before deciding. James held out a hand toward Rachel. "Passport." She passed it over. The officer checked the photo carefully beneath the gate lights, then the boarding pass, then the name again, Ethan Walker. Seat 3 Alpha, everything valid. No stolen document alert, no mismatch, no restrictions. Luis stepped closer to the counter screen. "Any system flags?" Rachel swallowed. "No." "Fraud alert?" "No." Luis looked up slowly. "Then why are we here?" Michael crossed his arms tighter. "Because sometimes common sense matters before the system catches something." James kept reading the passport. He had heard versions of that sentence his entire career. Sometimes it prevented disaster. Sometimes it humiliated innocent people. And experienced officers learned the difference usually came down to one thing: whether anyone bothered to verify facts before acting on instinct. James looked back at Ethan. "You got identification besides this?" "Yes, sir." "And travel authorization?" "Yes." Michael stepped forward immediately. He attempted to reach into his bag before. The words hung in the air heavier than they should have. A few nearby passengers shifted uncomfortably. Even they could hear how absurd it sounded now. An 11-year-old child, a backpack, a boarding gate. Still, public embarrassment has momentum. Once adults commit to suspicion in front of witnesses, backing down becomes emotionally expensive. James nodded toward Ethan gently. "Okay, son." Slowly, open the bag. Ethan crouched without hurry. The terminal lights reflected softly across the polished floor beneath him. Around Gate 14, conversations had nearly disappeared completely now. The only sounds were distant rolling luggage wheels and the muffled airport announcement echoing overhead about delayed departures in Dallas. Every phone camera remained pointed toward the scene. Ethan unzipped the backpack carefully. No sudden movement, no fear. Inside sat neatly folded clothes, headphones, a small leather notebook, and a slim document folder. James took the folder, opened it. His expression changed almost immediately. Travel authorization, emergency contacts, private transfer information, executive handling notes, everything professional, everything exactly where it should have been from the beginning. Luis leaned closer. Well, there it is. Silence spread through the gate like cold water. Rachel felt her stomach tighten because now the situation looked different from every angle. Not because the documents changed, because the adults around them suddenly realized they had treated suspicion like evidence. James closed the folder slowly. Who packed this for you? I did. Who arranged your travel? My family office coordinated with the airline. Michael let out a short, disbelieving breath. Family office. Ethan nodded once. The supervisor studied him harder now, searching for attitude, for arrogance, for anything that would justify how far this had gone. But Ethan offered nothing, just calm. That calmness was becoming unbearable. A woman sitting near the charging station whispered quietly to her husband. They never checked the paperwork before calling security? The husband shook his head slowly. Looks like they decided first. And that was the real wound underneath the moment. Not delay, not inconvenience. Judgment, public judgment. Rachel looked back toward her monitor and reopened the reservation file with trembling fingers. This time she searched deeper, far deeper. A hidden notation sat beneath the standard booking information. VIP executive handling requested. Do not alter seat assignment. Her pulse kicked hard against her throat. The note had been there the entire time. She remembered seeing it briefly earlier, then ignoring it, because the child standing in front of her had not matched the picture inside her head of someone important. Across the gate, Ethan quietly zipped his backpack closed again. Still no anger. That disturbed Rachel more than yelling would have. People who screamed gave you somewhere to place blame. Quiet people forced you to hear yourself clearly. The boarding door remained open. Outside, the aircraft sat motionless beneath the floodlights while ground crews waited for clearance updates. Every extra minute now risked losing departure priority with air traffic control. Money, schedules, connections. Pressure traveled upward quickly in aviation, and everyone at Gate 14 could feel it. A senior flight attendant stepped off the jet bridge then. Mid-40s, blonde hair pulled tightly back, Navy uniform pressed perfectly despite the late hour. Olivia Brooks. She walked directly toward the counter. The captain wants to know why we're still boarding. Michael answered without looking at her. Minor documentation issue. Olivia followed his line of sight toward Ethan. The boy sat quietly beside the window now, backpack resting against his sneakers, passport in his lap. Not crying, not hiding, just waiting. Her expression shifted almost invisibly. That child? Yes. Olivia frowned slightly. He's assigned to 3 Alpha. Michael looked irritated. And? She hesitated. Crew members noticed patterns after enough years in the air. Certain passengers, certain bookings, certain handling instructions. Business class seats close to the front often carried names connected to people airlines preferred not to upset. Executives, investors, legal counsel, board members. Olivia looked back toward Ethan again. Something about the situation felt badly off. Did anyone actually verify the booking before security got involved? She asked carefully. Michael's voice sharpened. We are handling it. That wasn't my question. For a second, the tension between them became visible. Not loud, not dramatic. Just 2 professionals realizing one of them might have crossed the line too early. Rachel stared silently at the hidden executive notation glowing on her screen. VIP handling. Protected seat assignment. Her chest tightened because she suddenly understood something awful. If Ethan Walker had looked wealthier, older, whiter, more polished, this never would have happened. And deep down, everyone at Gate 14 knew it too. The gate phone rang again. Sharp, sudden, loud enough to make Rachel flinch. She grabbed the receiver too quickly. Gate 14. Her expression changed almost immediately. Yes, he's here. A pause, then another. Rachel slowly looked toward Michael. It's corporate customer support. Michael extended his hand without speaking. The terminal suddenly felt smaller. Even the passengers nearby sensed it. The shift was subtle but real. People stopped, pretending not to listen. A businessman lowered his laptop screen halfway. The teenager recording near the window leaned forward in his chair. Because airports teach people something quickly. When executives start calling gates directly, somebody important is involved. Michael pressed the phone to his ear. This is Supervisor Turner. His voice carried the controlled confidence of a man still trying to stay in charge of the situation. Then he listened, and the confidence started fading.
Yes.
Dot, the passenger is present. Another pause. No, boarding has been delayed due to verification concerns. Silence again, longer this time. Michael's jaw tightened slightly. His eyes moved toward Ethan for the first time without suspicion. Just calculation. No, sir, he said carefully. We have not boarded him yet. Rachel watched the color slowly drain from his face. She could not hear the voice on the other end. She didn't need to. Years working airports had taught her something else too. Real authority almost never raises its voice. It gets quieter. Michael finally swallowed. I understand. Then the line disconnected. For a moment, nobody spoke. The hum of the terminal ventilation seemed suddenly louder than before. Olivia stepped closer first. What did they say? Michael stared at the floor for half a second too long, then answered flatly. They asked why a protected executive passenger is being held under security review. The words landed hard. Officer James Carter shifted his weight slowly. Even he raised an eyebrow at that one. Rachel felt her stomach twist tighter. Protected executive passenger. Not celebrity. Not VIP. Executive. Different category entirely. Michael rubbed one hand across his mouth. They transferred the call to senior operations. Nobody moved after that, because in aviation, everybody knows what senior operations means. Not customer complaints, not customer service, money, liability, people whose decisions affect stock prices. Across the gate, Ethan remained seated near the window, exactly where he had been the entire time. Backpack beside him. Passport resting lightly in both hands, still calm, still watching. Olivia walked toward him slowly, not as crew, as a person. You want some water? She asked gently. Ethan looked up. For the first time all evening, a tiny piece of emotion crossed his face. Not relief, gratitude. Yes, Mom, I'll be right back. She disappeared briefly down the jet bridge. Rachel watched her go and suddenly felt ashamed of how long it had taken anyone to offer the child basic kindness. Not legal help. Not status recognition, just water. That realization hurt more than the corporate call, because mistakes made under pressure happen every day in airports. But dignity costs nothing. Officer Luis Ramirez leaned quietly beside James. This thing's getting ugly. James kept his eyes on Ethan. It already was. The younger officer exhaled softly. They really thought this kid was dangerous? No, James said after a moment. They thought he didn't belong. That sentence sat heavily between them. Nearby, the woman with sunglasses from earlier lowered her phone for the first time, not because the drama ended, because it stopped feeling entertaining. People enjoy public humiliation right up until they realize they participated in it. Michael reopened the reservation screen himself now, fingers moving faster than before. Search deeper, check notes, review flags. And there it was. Executive handling status. Priority protected booking. Do not delay boarding. The notation had existed from the start. His breathing slowed, because suddenly he understood something terrifying. This situation was no longer about making the wrong call. It was about why he made it so quickly. He glanced toward Ethan again. Gray hoodie, scuffed sneakers, cheap backpack. His instinct had filled in the rest of the story automatically, and now the entire gate had witnessed it happen in real time. Olivia returned, carrying a paper cup of water. She crouched slightly beside Ethan instead of towering over him. Another small detail, another human choice. Here you go. Thank you. You traveling often? Ethan nodded once. Enough. Olivia studied him carefully. There was something unusual about the way he spoke. Not arrogant, not rehearsed, measured, like someone raised around adults who expected precision. My mom says airports tell you what people are really like, he said quietly. Olivia blinked. What does that mean? Ethan looked through the giant terminal windows toward the aircraft waiting outside beneath the floodlights. People decide very fast who matters when flights get delayed. Olivia had worked commercial aviation almost 20 years, and the boy was right. Pressure strips politeness away faster than almost anything else. When schedules collapse, people reveal themselves, who they ignore, who they protect, who they blame first. Michael suddenly stepped forward again, not aggressive this time, careful. Ethan. The boy looked up. I'd like to move this conversation somewhere private. A few passengers exchanged glances immediately. Now he wanted privacy. Now, after an entire gate had watched a child get treated like a possible threat, Ethan tilted his head slightly. Why? Michael hesitated. Because, Doc, this situation should probably be handled more discreetly. Ethan held his gaze. It could have been. The silence afterward was brutal. Short sentence, soft voice, but it cut clean through every excuse in the room. Rachel stared down at the counter. Officer James Carter looked away completely. Even Olivia closed her eyes briefly, because nobody there could honestly argue with the child. Michael nodded once. You're right. And for the first time that night, he actually sounded human. Not authoritative, not defensive, just tired. The gate loudspeaker crackled overhead. Final boarding call for another flight somewhere down the terminal. A baby cried faintly in the distance. Rolling suitcase wheels echoed against polished floors. Normal airport sounds. But Gate 14 no longer felt normal. The teenager recording lowered his phone completely now. This is gonna blow up online, he whispered to his friend. His friend shook his head slowly. It should. Rachel's computer flashed suddenly. New internal message. Priority escalation notice. Her throat tightened as she read it. Airport operations director en route to Gate 14. She looked at Michael immediately. His face went still. Operations directors did not come down to gates personally. Ever. Not for delays. Not for customer complaints. Not for routine mistakes. If one was physically walking across the terminal toward them, it meant somebody far above all of them wanted eyes on the situation immediately. James Carter quietly closed his incident notebook. Well, he murmured softly. What? The older officer watched Ethan sitting calmly beside the window. The truth's about to matter more than procedure. And somewhere deep down, every adult at Gate 14 suddenly realized the same thing. The child they had spent the last hour questioning had never once looked afraid. Because from the very beginning, he already knew exactly who held the real power. The first thing people noticed was the silence. Not complete silence. Airports are never silent. Announcements still echoed overhead. Coffee machines hissed from the cafe across the concourse. Somewhere down the terminal, a child laughed too loudly before a tired mother shushed him. But around Gate 14, the noise changed. Conversations shortened. Postures stiffened. Employees suddenly remembered every decision they had made during the last 40 minutes. Rachel straightened the stack of boarding documents on her counter for the third time in 5 minutes. Her fingers trembled slightly each time she touched the keyboard. Michael stood near the scanner with his arms folded so tightly across his chest they looked painful. Even Officer Luis Ramirez stopped checking his watch. Everyone was waiting now. The black airport operations vehicle rolled across the service road outside the windows beneath the floodlights. Slow, deliberate. No sirens, no flashing lights. Priority never needed spectacle. Ethan looked up once from his seat beside the glass wall, then calmly returned to the small leather notebook resting on his lap. He was writing something. Not doodling, writing, carefully. That unsettled Rachel almost more than everything else, because children usually try to forget uncomfortable moments. This boy looked like he was documenting one. A woman in a dark navy coat entered the terminal corridor 30 seconds later, flanked by 2 operations staff members carrying tablets. Sophia Reynolds, Director of Airport Operations, 48 years old, former Air Force Logistics Commander, known across the airport for one thing above all else, precision. She did not waste movement, did not raise her voice, did not repeat questions, and somehow that made people more afraid of disappointing her. Passengers near the gate moved aside automatically before she even reached them. Sophia stopped at the counter. Who supervised this escalation? Michael stepped forward immediately. I did. She looked at him quietly for a moment. Start from the beginning. No anger, no sarcasm. That was worse. Michael explained quickly. Unaccompanied minor. International route. Concerns over documentation, security review, delay, professional words, clean words. The kind institutions use when trying to make emotional decisions sound procedural. Officer James Carter listened with his jaw tight, then calmly added one sentence. He attempted to provide documentation before being stopped. Sophia's eyes moved slowly toward Michael. No expression, just stillness. That stillness carried more judgment than shouting ever could. Rachel felt heat rise behind her ears. Sophia turned toward the computer terminal. Reservation file. Rachel rotated the monitor silently. Sophia scanned the notes in less than 10 seconds, then stopped. Executive handling. Protected booking. Do not alter boarding sequence. She read the line twice, not because she misunderstood it, because she already understood exactly what it meant. When she looked back at Michael, something colder had entered her expression. And you proceeded with public verification anyway. It wasn't a question. Michael inhaled carefully. I believed additional caution was appropriate. For what reason? He hesitated. Nobody answered quickly when forced to say assumptions out loud. Sophia waited. Michael finally spoke. A child traveling alone in business class raised concerns. Sophia nodded once. That explains curiosity, not escalation. The words hit hard because they were true. Around the gate, several passengers exchanged quiet looks. The older woman near the charging station slowly lowered her phone into her purse altogether. This no longer felt like entertainment. It felt like witnessing someone being measured honestly for the first time. Sophia turned toward Ethan then. The boy looked very small sitting beneath the giant terminal windows with his backpack against his sneakers and a paper cup beside him. But he did not look intimidated. That was the part nobody could quite understand. Children recognize power instinctively. They shrink around it. They seek approval from it. Ethan didn't. Sophia approached slowly. Mr. Walker. Not Ethan. Mr. Walker. The title changed the atmosphere instantly. Respect is often visible in tiny choices. Ethan stood politely. Good evening. I'm Sophia Reynolds. I oversee airport operations. I know who you are. That caught her slightly off guard.
How?
You testified before the Transportation Committee after the Seattle runway incident. A few nearby employees looked up sharply. Sophia blinked once. Most adults barely remembered that hearing from 2 years earlier. An 11-year-old boy had not only recognized her. He remembered federal testimony. Interesting. I see, she said quietly. Ethan nodded once. Sophia studied him carefully now. Not his clothes, not the sneakers, not the hoodie.
Him.
And she saw it immediately. Discipline, observation, control. Traits usually learned from adults who lived around power constantly.
Were you treated appropriately tonight? She asked.
The question settled heavily across Gate 14. Everyone listened. Rachel stopped breathing entirely for a second. Michael's shoulders stiffened. Ethan thought before answering. Actually thought, like the truth mattered more than emotion. Finally, he spoke. I was treated according to what people assumed I was. Nobody moved after that. No dramatic reaction, no loud confrontation, just silence, heavy silence, because every adult there understood exactly what he meant. Sophia accepted the answer without defense. I understand. Ethan looked at her calmly. I think you do. Something inside Rachel collapsed a little then. Not because the boy sounded angry, because he sounded experienced. Children are not supposed to speak like that unless disappointment has reached them early. Sophia glanced toward the counter again. Who denied in private communication? Nobody answered immediately. Officer James Carter finally spoke. He requested a call earlier. Sophia turned toward Michael. His voice lowered. We were still verifying identity. And was there any evidence identity was false? Silence again. That silence was becoming the real story of the evening. Not confusion, not danger, avoidance. Across the terminal, another passenger quietly approached the gate area, holding a press credential clipped near her jacket pocket. Olivia noticed first. Wonderful. Media. Exactly what corporate aviation departments fear most. Not mistakes. Witness mistakes. Sophia looked back toward Ethan. Would you still like to board this flight? Ethan glanced through the window toward the aircraft waiting beneath the lights, then toward the employees around him. Finally back to Sophia. Yes. A simple answer. No revenge. No performance. No triumph. Just travel. and somehow that made everything feel worse because the child at the center of the humiliation was behaving with more maturity than most of the adults responsible for it. Sophia folded her hands lightly. There will be a formal review of tonight's decisions. Michael nodded slowly.
Yes, Mom.
Rachel stared at the floor. Officer Luis Ramirez quietly shifted his stance near the gate entrance. Even he could feel the mood changing now. This was no longer about a delayed flight. It was about accountability, about what people reveal when they think no important person is watching. Then Rachel's monitor flashed again. Another incoming message. Priority read. Her throat tightened as she opened it. She read the first line once, then twice, and all the color left her face. Sophia noticed immediately. What is it? Rachel looked toward Ethan before answering. Mom, someone from the Walker family office has arrived. And suddenly, every person standing at gate 14 understood the same thing at exactly the same moment. The real consequences had not even started yet. Nobody at gate 14 expected the representative from the Walker family office to arrive in person. Not this fast, not at night, and definitely not without lawyers. The terminal doors near the executive corridor opened quietly. A tall black man in a charcoal overcoat stepped into the concourse carrying nothing except a slim leather folder and a phone pressed loosely in one hand. Mid-50s, calm posture, controlled eyes, the kind of person airports move around carefully without ever announcing why. Behind him walked a younger woman in a dark gray suit pulling a compact carry-on. No security escort, no dramatic entrance. Real influence rarely travels loudly. Sophia Reynolds recognized the man immediately. Her expression changed before she could stop it. Daniel Mercer, she said. Several airline employees nearby stiffened instantly. Even Michael Turner reacted, because people inside aviation knew the name. Daniel Mercer had spent almost 20 years handling federal negotiations and corporate compliance for Walker Holdings. The company had contracts tied to airport infrastructure systems across the country, security technology, runway logistics, passenger data modernization. The kind of company most travelers never hear about, but every major airport quietly depends on. Daniel stopped near Ethan first, not the gate staff, not airport operations. The child. You okay? Ethan nodded once. Yes, sir. You been waiting long? A while. Daniel glanced briefly toward the wall clock above the gate. His jaw tightened almost invisibly. Not anger. Calculation. The younger woman beside him crouched slightly near Ethan.
Your mother called twice.
I know. She's worried. Ethan looked toward the aircraft outside. I'm fine. That answer hit Rachel harder than she expected, because the boy really was fine. Embarrassed, maybe. Tired, certainly. But composed. Too composed for someone his age. Children should not know how to stay emotionally small while adults publicly debate whether they belong somewhere. Daniel finally turned towards Sophia Reynolds. Director Reynolds. Mr. Mercer. No handshake. Just recognition. Two professionals stepping carefully around a growing disaster. Daniel's eyes moved slowly across the gate area. The security officers. The passengers still watching. The half-lowered phones. Michael standing rigid beside the scanner. Then he saw the open reservation file still glowing on the monitor. Executive handling. Protected boarding. He understood immediately. His voice stayed perfectly level. Can someone explain why an 11-year-old child with verified credentials was subjected to public escalation before basic documentation review? Nobody answered quickly enough. That silence answered for them. Michael stepped forward first. We acted according to safety concerns. Daniel looked at him calmly. What concerns specifically? The situation appeared irregular. Meaning? Michael hesitated again. And every second of hesitation made the truth uglier. Daniel waited. Finally, Michael spoke carefully. A child traveling alone in premium class naturally raises questions. Daniel's expression never changed. But Sophia noticed something dangerous into the stillness around him. Questions, Daniel repeated quietly.
Or assumptions?
Nobody breathed for a moment. The younger woman beside him opened her tablet silently and began documenting names. Rachel saw it happen and felt cold spread through her chest, because now this was official, not gossip, not customer service, documentation. The beginning of consequences. Officer James Carter stepped slightly closer. For the record, the child cooperated fully once we arrived. Daniel nodded respectfully toward him. Thank you, officer. Then his attention returned to Michael. Did he ever resist? No. Raise his voice? No. Threaten anyone? Daniel tilted his head slightly, then helped me understand at what point an obedient child became a security event. Michael opened his mouth. Nothing came out. Because there are moments when people suddenly hear themselves clearly for the first time, and the sound is ugly. A nearby passenger quietly whispered to his wife, "This is bad." She nodded slowly. They treated that kid like he was dangerous. The husband stared toward Ethan. No, worse. Rachel looked over at the boy again. He sat quietly near the window listening to adults discuss him like a legal problem instead of a child, and somehow he still looked calmer than anyone else there. Olivia Brooks stepped beside him carefully. You hungry? Ethan looked up, slightly surprised. A little. I'll get you something. Daniel noticed that immediately. Not because of the food, because she was the first employee since this started who acted like the child mattered more than the incident. Thank you, he told her softly. Olivia nodded once and disappeared toward the terminal cafe. Sophia folded her arms slowly. Mr. Mercer, I want you to know the airport is taking this extremely seriously. I would hope so. No rude voices, no threats. That somehow made the pressure worse. People expect powerful men to explode, but disciplined people understand something more dangerous. Calm creates records. Anger creates excuses. Daniel glanced toward Ethan and again before speaking. You know what concerns me most, Director Reynolds? Sophia met his eyes.
What?
That every person involved believed they were being reasonable. The words settled over the gate heavily, because that was exactly the problem. Nobody here woke up intending cruelty. They followed instinct, pattern recognition, bias disguised as professionalism, and now a child had become collateral damage inside a system, convinced it was protecting itself. The younger assistant finally spoke for the first time.
Mr. Mercer.
She turned the tablet slightly toward him. A social media clip was already spreading online. Short video, 30 seconds. Michael shouting, "Do not reach into your bag." The camera angle showed Ethan frozen beside the gate wall afterward. Small, silent, surrounded by adults. Over 200,000 views already. Rachel covered her mouth softly. The terminal suddenly felt colder. Daniel barely looked at the screen. This is why public humiliation matters, he said quietly. People think embarrassment disappears when facts arrive later. Nobody argued, because everybody knew the internet rarely cared about corrections once an image spread far enough. Sophia inhaled slowly. We'll issue a formal response. Daniel nodded once. You should. Then he added something softer. But the public statement isn't the important part. His eyes moved across the employees one by one. The important part is whether anybody here understands what actually happened tonight. Silence again. Deep silence. Not defensive this time. Reflective. Even Michael looked different now. Smaller somehow. Like certainty had finally drained out of him. Daniel walked toward Ethan then. You still want to take this flight? Ethan looked toward the aircraft through the glass. The runway lights shimmered against the dark Colorado night beyond the terminal.
Yes.
Daniel studied him quietly.
You sure?
Ethan nodded once. I don't want this to become bigger than it already is. Several adults lowered their eyes after hearing that, because the child in front of them had just shown more emotional restraint than most grown men ever learn. And somewhere deep inside Gate 14, shame finally began replacing defensiveness. Olivia returned carrying a paper bag and a bowl of soup balanced carefully on a cafeteria tray. Chicken noodle. Airport food. Overpriced. Too salty, but warm. And right then warmth mattered more than quality. You probably haven't eaten, she said softly. Ethan looked genuinely surprised again. No, Mom. She handed him the tray carefully. Careful. It's hot. Thank you. The boy spoke with the same quiet politeness he had shown all night. No bitterness, no attitude. That made the guilt around Gate 14 heavier by the minute. Because kindness offered after humiliation always arrives late. Ethan rested the tray beside him and slowly peeled back the plastic lid from the soup. Steam rose into the cold airport air between them. Olivia noticed his hands. Steady, not shaking. Most adults would have been rattled by now. She sat carefully in the empty chair beside him. My son's around your age. Ethan glanced at her. Does he travel alone? Olivia smiled faintly. No chance. His mother would lose her mind. For the first time all evening, the corner of Ethan's mouth almost moved. Almost. Then the expression disappeared. Daniel Mercer stood several feet away speaking quietly with Sophia Reynolds while the younger assistant typed notes into her tablet at rapid speed. Rachel could hear fragments. Legal exposure. Passenger escalation protocol. Federal reporting obligations. Each phrase tightened the knot in her chest further. Because she understood what corporate language really meant. Not punishment. Documentation. Everything tonight was becoming permanent. Michael remained near the gate scanner, staring at the floor beneath the boarding lane ropes. He had stopped trying to defend himself 20 minutes earlier. That was the moment the situation truly changed. Defensive people still believe they are right. Silent people usually know they crossed a line. Officer James Carter approached him slowly. "You okay?" Michael exhaled through his nose.
No.
James nodded once. "That's probably appropriate." The supervisor looked over toward Ethan. The child sat quietly eating soup while adults in expensive coats discussed institutional liability around him. Michael shook his head faintly. "I thought I was protecting the flight." James kept his voice calm. "You were protecting your assumption." The sentence landed harder than any accusation could have, because deep down Michael already knew it was true. James had spent 30 years in security work, military bases, federal buildings, airports, and experience had taught him something younger officers often resisted at first. Real threats rarely look the way fear imagines they will. Bias makes people feel sharp while actually making them blind. Across the gate, passengers had started speaking in softer voices now. Not because tension disappeared, because shame had entered the room. The older businessman with the Rolex finally closed his laptop completely. A woman who recorded the confrontation earlier quietly deleted a video from her phone. Not everyone did, but some did. And that mattered, because humanity often survives in tiny private choices nobody applauds. Sophia stepped away from Daniel after another low conversation. She approached Rachel directly. "Walk me through the first interaction." Rachel's throat tightened immediately. Every employee knows that tone, not angry. Precise. The tone used when facts matter more than feelings. Rachel swallowed. "He came to the priority lane with a business class boarding pass."
And?
"I thought it might be fraudulent." "Why?" The question arrived gently. That somehow made it harder. Rachel searched desperately for professional language. Unaccompanied minor, irregular presentation, behavioral indicators. But every explanation collapsed under one simple truth. The child did not look like someone she expected to see in business class. And now saying anything else sounded dishonest even to herself. Finally, she answered quietly, "I made assumptions based on appearances." Sophia held her gaze. To Rachel's surprise, the director did not humiliate her, did not lecture. Instead, she asked something worse. "Do you understand why that matters?" Rachel's eyes drifted toward Ethan, still eating quietly, still composed. "Yes." Sophia folded her arms lightly. "Tell me." Rachel's voice lowered almost to a whisper because if he had looked wealthier, older, dot more polished, none of this would happen. The director nodded once. Not approval, recognition. That's the first honest thing anyone has said tonight. Rachel looked down immediately. Her eyes burned suddenly, not from fear of losing her job, from the realization that she had become the kind of adult she used to hate when she was younger. People rarely notice when cynicism hardens inside them, until one moment reveals it completely. A phone buzzed sharply in Daniel Mercer's coat pocket. He glanced at the screen and answered immediately.
Yes.
He listened silently for several seconds, then looked directly toward Ethan. "She wants to speak with him." Ethan wiped his hands carefully on a napkin and stood. Daniel handed him the phone. The entire gate instinctively looked away slightly. Some conversations should remain private. But even from several feet away, Rachel could hear the softness enter Ethan's voice for the first time all evening. "Hey, Mom?" Silence. Then another quieter sentence. "I'm okay." Something inside the gate shifted hearing that, because suddenly he sounded like what he actually was, a child. Not a case, not a passenger profile, not an operational issue. Just somebody's son trying not to worry his mother. Olivia looked down at the floor. Even James Carter rubbed one tired hand across his forehead. The emotional distance people had built around the situation cracked slightly in that moment. Ethan listened quietly for another minute, then smiled faintly. A real smile this time. Small, tired.
Human.
No, he said softly into the phone. You don't need to come. Daniel looked away after hearing that, because he understood exactly what the boy was doing. Protecting the adults from becoming even more ashamed. That kind of emotional restraint in children never appears naturally. It gets learned, usually early, usually around powerful people who expect composure under pressure. Ethan handed the phone back carefully. She says, "Thank you for helping." Nobody knew how to answer that, especially not Michael, because the family that had every reason to explode with anger was still choosing grace. And grace, when offered to people who know they failed morally, can feel almost unbearable. The boarding clock above the gate flashed another delay update. 43 minutes behind schedule now. Passengers should have been furious. Most weren't. The flight delay no longer felt like the real issue. Sophia glanced toward the aircraft outside the windows, then back toward Ethan. "You know," she said carefully, "most people in your position would be demanding names right now." Ethan looked at her quietly. "My father says people show you who they are fastest when they think they're protecting something important." Sophia absorbed that. And what do you think they were protecting tonight? Ethan's eyes drifted slowly across the gate. The uniforms, the badges, the expensive luggage, the silent faces avoiding his gaze. Then he answered softly, "Not safety." Nobody spoke after that, because every adult there already knew exactly what he meant. The captain finally came off the aircraft. That alone told everyone the situation had crossed into dangerous territory. Captains do not leave cockpits during boarding delays unless operations demands answers. Captain Robert Hayes walked through the jet bridge with quick, controlled steps, silver hair neat beneath the terminal lights, uniform pressed perfectly despite the late hour. He looked first at Sophia Reynolds, then at the security officers, then at the child sitting quietly near the window with an empty soup container beside him. His forehead tightened immediately. "That's the passenger?" Nobody answered right away, because the question itself exposed how ridiculous the entire situation had become. Robert lowered his voice. "We've been delayed nearly an hour over an 11-year-old with valid documents." Michael stared at the floor. Sophia answered carefully. The situation escalated before proper verification procedures were completed. The captain looked toward Ethan again. The boy met his eyes calmly. No resentment, no fear, just observation. Robert had flown commercial aircraft for almost 3 decades. He had dealt with drunken passengers, panic attacks, bomb threats, weather emergencies, mechanical failures. And experience taught him something simple. The people who frightened others most were rarely the dangerous ones. He stepped closer toward Ethan.
You all right, son?
"Yes, sir. Sorry you had to go through this." The apology landed heavily across the gate, because it was the first direct apology from anyone in real authority. Ethan nodded politely. "Thank you." Robert glanced toward Daniel Mercer then. "I assume corporate's already involved." Daniel answered calmly. "Very." The captain exhaled once through his nose. "Wonderful. A delayed departure was one thing. A public escalation involving a child tied to one of the largest aviation infrastructure firms in the country was something else entirely. Especially now that videos were spreading online." The younger assistant stepped beside Daniel quietly. The clip passed 1 million views. Rachel closed her eyes briefly. 1 million. By morning, it would be everywhere. Morning shows, travel blogs, cable news debates about profiling and authority, and every replay would show the same image. A small boy standing frozen, while adults treated him like a threat. Captain Hayes rubbed one hand across his jaw. "Public relations is going to burn over this." Daniel looked at him steadily. "This should not primarily concern public relations." The captain nodded once. "Fair point." That was another thing powerful professionals understood. When institutions focus first on optics instead of harm, they usually repeat the same mistakes. Across the gate, Ethan carefully packed his notebook back into his backpack. Olivia noticed him sliding the pen into place with precise movements. "Do you always write things down?" she asked softly. "Mostly when I'm trying to understand people." That answer stayed with her, because adults spend years assuming children fail to notice emotional details. In reality, children often notice everything. They simply lack the authority to challenge what they see. Officer James Carter leaned quietly against the counter nearby. "You know," he said toward Ethan, "most kids your age would have been crying by now." Ethan shrugged lightly. "My father says staying calm helps you hear what people really mean." James almost smiled. "Almost. Your father sounds smart. He notices patterns." The older officer looked around Gate 14 slowly. Phones lowering, employees avoiding eye contact, passengers whispering quieter now than before.
Yeah.
Patterns. Sophia's phone vibrated sharply in her hand. She checked the screen, then looked immediately toward Daniel. They want a conference call. Daniel already knew who they meant. Corporate legal, airline executives, risk management. The machinery had started moving. Sophia stepped several feet away while answering. "Yes, this is Reynolds." Her posture straightened instantly, listening, explaining, choosing words carefully. Everyone nearby watched her expression tighten little by little. Not panic, pressure. The kind created when people above you realize a problem is bigger than first reported. Michael sat down heavily in one of the boarding chairs for the first time all night. He suddenly looked older, tired in a way sleep would not fix. Rachel approached slowly. "Michael." He shook his head before she finished. "I know." She lowered her voice. "I should have checked the file properly. We both should have." Silence settled between them. Then Michael quietly admitted the thing neither wanted to say aloud earlier. He just didn't fit the picture. Rachel stared at him, not because she disagreed, because hearing it spoken honestly sounded awful. Michael noticed immediately. "That's the truth, isn't it?" She looked over toward Ethan, gray hoodie, scuffed shoes, small backpack. A child most wealthy travelers would barely notice passing through a terminal, and yet somehow connected to people powerful enough to freeze an airport operation within minutes. "Yes," she whispered finally, "that's the truth." Michael leaned back slowly in the chair. "I spent years telling younger staff not to stereotype passengers." Rachel looked down. "So did I." That was the cruel part about bias. Most people imagine prejudice belongs only to openly hateful individuals. Real life is uglier. Sometimes prejudice sounds responsible, professional, reasonable. Sometimes it wears uniforms and believes itself honest. Sophia returned from the call several minutes later. Her face had gone completely still. Corporate stillness, the kind executives wear before delivering difficult truths. "The airline board has been informed," she said quietly. Even the passengers nearby reacted to that. Board level, this had officially become catastrophic internally. Captain Hayes muttered under his breath, "Jesus." Daniel remained calm. "What are their instructions?" Sophia looked toward Ethan first before answering. "They want full preservation of all surveillance footage and employee communications connected to the incident." Rachel's stomach dropped. Preservation orders meant legal exposure was now expected. No more internal misunderstanding narrative. No more casual cleanup. Everything said tonight mattered now. Every expression, every command, every delay. Officer Luis Ramirez crossed his arms tightly. All this over one bad judgment call. James looked at him carefully. "No," the officer said softly, "over a system full of them." That sentence settled deep into the terminal air because everyone knew he was right. The issue was never only Ethan Walker. The issue was how quickly ordinary people become suspicious when someone violates invisible social expectations. An older black woman sitting near the charging station suddenly spoke up from across the gate. Quiet voice, steady voice. "I traveled through airports for 40 years, she said. "This ain't the first time I've watched people decide who belongs somewhere." Nobody interrupted her.
You just happened to pick the wrong child tonight.
Complete silence followed. Not angry silence. The worst kind. Truthful silence. Ethan looked toward the woman and gave a small, respectful nod. She nodded back. Two strangers understanding something painful without needing more words. And for the first time since the evening began, several people at Gate 14 stopped looking at Ethan Walker as the center of the problem and started looking at themselves instead. The boarding lane remained empty even after the final boarding announcement ended. Nobody complained anymore. Not loudly. Something bigger than inconvenience had settled over Gate 14 now. Passengers still checked watches, still texted family members, still worried about missed connections in New York, but frustration had shifted direction. Earlier, people were irritated at the delay. Now they were disturbed by the reason behind it. Ethan sat quietly near the terminal window while ground crew lights moved slowly across the dark tarmac outside. Snow had started falling lightly beyond the runway, soft white streaks drifting under the airport floodlights. The terminal air felt colder than before. Or maybe people were just more aware of themselves. Daniel Mercer stood near the counter, reviewing messages on his phone when another operations employee approached Sophia Reynolds carrying a printed folder. Not digital, printed. That alone told her the situation had moved beyond routine procedure. "Mom," the employee said carefully, "corporate legal requested preliminary timelines." Sophia accepted the folder without looking away from Ethan. "Thank you." The employee hesitated before leaving, then quietly asked something nobody else had dared say directly. "Was the child really connected to Walker Holdings?" Daniel answered before Sophia could.
He is.
The young employee swallowed immediately and stepped away. Around in the gate, several passengers exchanged looks again. The name meant something now. Not just wealth, influence, infrastructure, airports, government contracts. Systems ordinary travelers never think about until something breaks. Michael Turner heard the whisper starting behind him. "That's the Walker Company?" No wonder operations came down. They thought he was lying. Each sentence chipped away another piece of certainty he used to carry naturally. For years, he believed experience made him good at reading people. Tonight, he realized something worse. He had been reading categories, not people. Rachel remained behind the counter, pretending to organize boarding groups that everyone knew were no longer relevant. Her hands moved automatically, mind somewhere else entirely. She kept replaying the same moment. "Do not reach into your bag." The words sounded different now, not cautious, humiliating. And humiliation changed shape once witnesses understand it was unnecessary. Olivia returned from the aircraft again, carrying a folded airline blanket. "You might be cold," she said gently. Ethan accepted it quietly. "Thank you. You're welcome." She sat beside him for a moment without speaking. The airport lights reflected softly across the glass behind them. Travelers moved through the terminal farther away, unaware an entire moral reckoning was unfolding near one delayed flight. Olivia glanced toward the leather notebook in Ethan's lap. "You writing about tonight?" "A little." "What are you writing?" Ethan looked down at the page before answering. "Things people reveal when they think someone has less power than they do." The sentence landed softly, but Olivia felt it deep in her chest, because she had seen it too. Flight attendants see humanity at altitude every day. Kindness, cruelty, entitlement, fear, and power changes people fastest when they believe nobody important was watching. "You know," she said carefully, "most adults never learn that lesson." Ethan looked toward her. "My mother says some adults stop questioning themselves because it hurts too much." Olivia stared at him quietly. No child should sound this emotionally experienced, but some do. Especially children raised around systems where image and status shape every room. At the far end of the gate, Captain Robert Hayes spoke quietly with Officer James Carter. "This thing will probably end careers," the captain muttered. James shook his head slowly. "It should change training." Robert looked surprised. The older officer continued, "If all we do is punish people, nobody learns anything. They just get better at hiding the same behavior." That stayed with the captain. Because aviation survives through systems, checklists, corrections, accountability. Pilots are taught something from the first day of training. A hidden mistake is always more dangerous than an admitted one. Sophia Reynolds opened the printed report folder slowly. Inside sat preliminary summaries already being drafted by legal review teams. Timeline discrepancies, escalation questions, passenger witness accounts. One section highlighted in yellow caught her attention immediately. Passenger reports indicate child remained calm and compliant throughout entire incident. She closed the folder slowly. That sentence mattered, because calm compliance removes justification from institutional overreaction. Sophia looked toward Michael again. Walk with me. He followed her several yards away from the passengers near an empty gate across the corridor. What happens now? He asked quietly. Sophia answered honestly. I don't know yet. Michael nodded once. Then after several seconds, I didn't think I was profiling him. No one ever does. The answer came immediately. Not cruel.
Just true.
Sophia folded her arms. You know what concerns me most? Michael waited. That nobody involved stopped to ask whether the child felt safe. He looked down instantly because she was right again. Every conversation tonight focused on protecting systems, flights, procedures, security. Almost nobody asked what the experience felt like for the child standing alone inside it. That realization hollowed something out inside him. Back near the window, the older black woman from earlier slowly approached Ethan with careful steps.
Young man,
She said softly. Ethan looked up immediately. Yes, Mom? She smiled gently. I just wanted you to know, you handled yourself with more dignity than most grown folks in this airport. Ethan lowered his eyes slightly. Thank you. The woman studied him for a moment, then added something quieter. Don't let this place teach you to become hard. The sentence hit several people nearby harder than she realized, because bitterness is often how humiliation survives. The woman squeezed his shoulder gently before returning to her seat. Ethan watched her walk away. Then he looked back out toward the runway lights beyond the glass. Daniel Mercer approached him quietly.
your father just landed in Chicago.
Ethan nodded. He heard everything. A pause. He angry? Daniel considered the question carefully.
No.
Ethan looked surprised at that. Daniel crouched slightly beside him. He's disappointed.
In me?
The older man's expression softened for the first time all evening. No, Ethan. A long silence passed between them. Then Daniel added quietly, he's disappointed that a child had to be this composed for adults to behave professionally. Ethan looked down at the blanket folded across his lap. That sentence finally reached somewhere deeper than the humiliation itself. Because children do not want praise for surviving adult failures. They want adults who prevent the failures from happening. Across Gate 14, snow continued falling beyond the runway while inside the terminal, every person there slowly confronted the same uncomfortable truth. The real danger tonight had never been the boy. It was the ease with which ordinary people decided he did not belong. The snow outside, thickened as midnight, crept closer over Denver. Runway lights blurred softly behind white streaks drifting across the dark airfield. Ground crews moved slower now beneath the weather, reflective jackets glowing under floodlights like distant signals in the storm. Inside Gate 14, nobody seemed eager to leave anymore, not even the passengers. The delay had crossed beyond inconvenience and become something people would remember years later when talking about airports, fairness, and the strange ways power reveals itself. Ethan stood near the boarding lane, quietly adjusting the straps on his backpack. Small movements, careful movements, the kind children make when they are trying not to take up too much space around adults. That detail bothered Olivia Brooks more than anything else. She had seen frightened passengers before, angry passengers, entitled passengers. But there was something heartbreaking about a child instinctively minimizing himself to make grown people more comfortable. Sophia Reynolds walked back toward the gate, carrying her phone tightly in one hand. Corporate approved departure, she said to Captain Hayes, but they want direct reports filed before sunrise. The captain nodded once. Understood. Sophia looked toward Ethan then. For several seconds, she simply watched him, not as an operations problem, as a human being. Then she crossed the gate slowly. Mr. Walker. Ethan turned politely. Yes, Mom? Sophia inhaled carefully. Every employee nearby instinctively listened, because apologies from institutions matter differently than private regret, especially when witnesses are involved. I owe you an apology, she said quietly, not because your family has influence, because this airport failed to treat you with basic dignity before your identity was fully understood. Nobody moved. Nobody interrupted. The entire gate seemed to pause around the words. Ethan looked at her for a moment before answering. Thank you for saying it that way. Something flickered across Sophia's expression. Surprise. Because most adults would have accepted the apology immediately. But the child understood the difference between respect based on status and respect based on humanity. That difference was the entire point. Daniel Mercer watched silently from several feet away. No interference, no legal performance, just observation. Because real accountability cannot be forced into existence by attorneys. People either understand the moral failure or they don't. Sophia lowered her voice slightly. You should never have been made to feel suspicious for existing outside someone else's expectations. Ethan nodded once, then quietly said something that hit harder than anyone expected. I don't think they were trying to hurt me. Michael looked up immediately. Rachel stopped breathing for a second. Ethan continued calmly. I think they were scared of being wrong in front of other people. Complete silence. Because the child had just described institutional behavior more accurately than most executive training seminars ever do. Fear of embarrassment, fear of liability, fear of appearing careless. Those fears drive more public humiliation than cruelty alone ever could. Officer James Carter slowly folded his arms. The kid really did understand people. Michael finally stepped forward after nearly an hour of silence. Every eye followed him. His face looked drained now, no authority left in it, only exhaustion. He stopped several feet from Ethan.
I need to say something.
The boy looked at him quietly. Michael swallowed hard, not because he feared lawsuits, because shame is physically difficult to carry once honesty finally arrives. I thought I was protecting the flight, he admitted, but I wasn't. His voice tightened slightly. I saw a kid who didn't match the picture in my head of who belongs in business class. And instead of questioning myself, I questioned you. Nobody spoke, not even Daniel, because this was the first fully honest sentence Michael had offered all night. He looked down briefly before continuing. That's not how professionals are supposed to behave. Ethan studied him carefully, then asked softly, Do you think you would stop my father like that? The question landed like a physical blow. Michael opened his mouth. Nothing came out, because they both already knew the answer. No. He would not have stopped a confident adult man in an expensive coat carrying the same reservation. The problem was never procedure. It was perception. Michael nodded slowly. No, he admitted. The truth settled heavily through the gate. Painful, necessary. Sophia watched Rachel closely then. The younger woman finally stepped away from the counter too. Her eyes were red now, not dramatic tears, quiet ones. I grew up poor, she said softly. People used to look at my mom like she didn't belong places either. Ethan listened silently. Rachel shook her head faintly. And somehow I still became this person tonight. Olivia looked toward her gently. No, tonight just forced you to see it. That was the difference. Bad people rarely examine themselves. Ashamed people sometimes do. Rachel wiped quickly beneath one eye. I'm sorry. Ethan nodded politely. Not forgiving, not punishing, just listening. The older black woman from earlier smiled sadly from her seat nearby. You know, she said quietly, this is the first time in my life I've seen airport employees actually stop and reflect after something like this. James Carter glanced toward her. Usually everybody just gets defensive. She nodded. That's because accountability feels personal before it feels useful. Daniel Mercer finally stepped closer again. The reason this matters, he said calmly, is because most people who experience moments like this do not have someone powerful arriving to help. Every employee there felt that sentence deeply because he was right. Most travelers humiliated by assumptions simply absorb the damage quietly and keep moving. No operations director appears, no legal team arrives, no public reckoning happens. The system continues unchanged. Ethan looked out toward the snow beyond the runway windows again. Sometimes people are only careful when they think someone important is watching. Daniel glanced at him.
And what do you think matters more?
The boy thought for a moment, then answered softly. Who you are when nobody important is watching. Olivia closed her eyes briefly after hearing that, because somewhere along the way, an 11-year-old child had learned a lesson many adults never fully grasp. Character is revealed most clearly in moments without consequences. Gate 14 remained quiet for several long seconds. Then Captain Hayes checked his watch and exhaled slowly. We should probably get this flight in the air. Nobody disagreed. But strangely, nobody rushed either. because deep down, every person there understood something uncomfortable. The delay tonight had never really been caused by weather or paperwork or security. It was caused by the dangerous speed with which human beings decide who deserves trust. Captain Hayes gave the final word to reopen boarding, not loudly, just one quiet sentence into his radio. Let's get him on the aircraft. And somehow, that simple instruction felt heavier than any announcement made all night. Rachel picked up Ethan's boarding pass again. Her fingers moved slower this time. Careful, respectful, as if the paper itself had become evidence of everything she had failed to see. She scanned it. The machine gave a clean beep, green light. The same green light it would have shown an hour earlier if anyone had trusted the process before trusting fear. Rachel looked at Ethan. "Mr. Walker," she said softly, "you're cleared to board." The title did not fix what happened, but it marked a change. Ethan took the boarding pass with both hands. "Thank you." He turned to Daniel Mercer. The older man adjusted the strap on Ethan's backpack with the small tenderness of someone who had known the child for years. "You have everything?" "Yes, sir." "Notebook?" "Yes." "Passport?"
Yes.
"Call when you land, I will." Daniel held his gaze a moment longer. There was pride there and worry. The kind adults try to hide from children because they think children cannot read it. But Ethan could. He always could. Daniel leaned closer and lowered his voice. "Fee, you did not have to be that strong tonight." Ethan looked down for a second, then back up. "I know," that was all he said. But those two words carried the whole weight of the evening. Olivia Brooks stood at the entrance to the jet bridge. She was supposed to escort him on board now, but she waited. She did not rush him. That mattered. After an entire hour of being pushed, stopped, questioned, watched, and judged, the first real kindness was time. Ethan turned toward Officer James Carter.
Thank you for listening.
James nodded once.
You made it easy.
Ethan shook his head lightly. "No, sir. I just told the truth." James had no answer for that, because truth should have been enough from the beginning. The older black woman near the charging station raised one hand gently as Ethan passed. He paused. She smiled at him.
Keep your heart soft, young man.
Ethan nodded with quiet respect. "I'll try." The woman pressed her hand to her chest. No grand moment, no applause. Just recognition between two people who understood what it costs to remain gentle after being misread. Michael Turner stood near the scanner, shoulders low now, face pale under the terminal lights. For most of the night, he had looked like a man in charge. Now he looked like a man standing beside the damage he had caused. As Ethan approached, Michael stepped forward. Not too close, not blocking the path, just enough to speak. "Ethan." The boy stopped. Michael swallowed. "I'm sorry." The words came out rough, human, too late, but real. "I am sorry for how I treated you. I should have checked first. I should have listened. I let my assumptions lead me." Ethan looked at him carefully. Around them, nobody moved. Not Rachel, not Sophia, not Daniel Mercer, not the passengers still watching from their seats. The boy did not smile. He did not offer easy forgiveness. He simply nodded. "I hope you check first next time." Michael's face tightened. "Yes," he said quietly. "I will." That was all. And maybe that was enough for one night. Not redemption, not absolution. Just the beginning of repair. Ethan walked into the jet bridge beside Olivia. The sound of his worn sneakers against the metal floor echoed softly ahead of them. Outside the glass walls, snow continued falling over the runway lights. Inside the jet bridge, the air smelled faintly of fuel, carpet, and recycled warmth from the aircraft. Olivia glanced down at him.
You okay?
Ethan breathed in slowly, then let it out. "I think so." She nodded. Being okay can take a little while. He looked at her then, really looked. And for the first time, she saw something young in his face. Not executive calm, not trained composure, not the strange poise that had unsettled everyone at the gate. Just a tired boy. "Yeah," he said softly. They reached the aircraft door. A second flight attendant stepped aside immediately. "Welcome aboard, Mr. Walker." Ethan walked into the business class cabin. Several passengers looked up. Some had seen the gate incident. Some had only heard pieces. Some looked ashamed. Some looked curious. Ethan did not look at any of them for long. He moved down the aisle to seat 3 Alpha, placed his backpack beneath the console, and sat by the window. The seat looked too large around him. Soft leather, dim cabin lights, a glass of water waiting on the side table. He touched the cup lightly, then looked out into the night. At the gate, Rachel watched through the window as the cabin door finally closed. The aircraft pushed back 10 minutes later. No announcement explained the delay. No public statement came over the speakers. The plane simply moved away from the gate, slow and silent, its lights cutting through the snow as it rolled toward the runway. But Gate 14 did not return to normal. Normal was gone. Sophia Reynolds stood behind Rachel while Michael began the first incident report. He typed slowly, deleted, typed again. This time, he did not soften it. A minor passenger with valid documentation was delayed and subjected to unnecessary public security escalation after staff relied on appearance-based assumptions rather than full verification. The words looked terrible on the screen. They should have. Rachel read them over his shoulder and wiped her eyes once. Sophia did not comfort them. Not yet. Some discomfort is necessary. Some pain teaches what convenience hides. Daniel Mercer stood near the window until the aircraft disappeared into the snowy distance. Then he turned back toward the gate. This was not about one child, he said quietly. Everyone heard him, even those pretending not to. It was about what happens to people who have no one coming. No one answered, because that was the wound under everything. Ethan had a name that opened doors, a family office, legal counsel, corporate visibility, power. But most people stopped by suspicion do not have those things. They just have their dignity. And too often, that is the first thing taken from them. Inside the aircraft, Ethan watched Denver shrink beneath the clouds. The city lights blurred through the falling snow until they looked like scattered gold dust. He opened his notebook one last time and wrote a single sentence. Respect should arrive before recognition. Then he closed the notebook and leaned back against the seat. For the first time all night, his shoulders relaxed, not completely, but enough. And on the ground below, in a gate that would look ordinary again by morning, a few adults finally understood that professionalism without humanity is just control with a name tag. If this story reminded you that every person deserves dignity before status, take a moment to like this video, subscribe for more stories that speak to truth and compassion, and comment these 3 words: respect before judgment.